Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Federico Talks Watches. Today, I wanted to do a little retrospective and talk about 3 watch brands that 10 to 15 years ago were way bigger than what they are today. 3 brands that have fallen from the top of the mountain and why I think that happened. Now, of course, before we get started, customary wristwatch check. Today, I'm wearing my H. Moser Endeavor Big Date, rose gold with a black dial. I absolutely love this watch. Don't wear it a ton, but it's time for some wrist time. And also, guys, don't forget to check out delraywatch.com. We got in some pretty cool and pretty rare pieces lately, including this Omega Museum 1945 manual wind chronograph. One of the coolest vintage-inspired Omegas ever made, very underrated and hard to find, and it's available. We got in a Debethune DB25 ball moon phase in white gold, one of the upper echelons of independent horology, box, papers, just serviced, and the cheapest one in the US, if of course you can find one at all. It's a very rare piece. And a Grand Seiko Elegance Kishin with that beautiful baby blue dial and that manual wind movement. This is the definition of an elegant dress watch with personality. Nothing boring about this one. All that and way more at delraywatch.com, the best place for a watch geek to buy a watch. So yeah, guys, I was thinking back to when I first got into watches in the mid 2000s, 2007, 2008. And I was thinking, of browsing Time Zone, kind of bored when I was in college or even when I started working for Cartier and I was just learning about watches. And I was thinking, what brands were really popular back then, or at least way more popular than they are now? And I came up with 3 brands that really almost feel extinct nowadays. And I wanted to talk about those as kind of a retrospective of back in, when I first got into watches. And in no particular order, we're going to start with Frank Mueller. Now, Frank Mueller was already on a downward path in the mid-2000s, but in the late 90s and the early 2000s, they were super duper popular. I mean, they were the it watch brand. Everybody loved them. They loved the tonneau shape, the innovative dials. They were the cool watch. Now, the master of complications, as he dubs himself, in my humble opinion, has made many mistakes. The watches were extremely overpriced for simple ETA movements. We're talking ETA-based chronographs for $20,000 in stainless steel, which is nuts. Then, of course, while Frank Mueller has made some of the most complicated watches on Earth, 99% of their collection was just ETA-based. And then I think even now, when things have moved even, into more of a sports watch category, because dress watches were a lot hotter back then, Frank Mueller just didn't translate. They stuck with the tonneau shape, which is beautiful, and now they have the yachting versions and the Vanguard, but they didn't translate very well into sports watches. Frank Mueller is still predominantly a dress watch, which is not a problem with me. I love dress watches, but they did not evolve in the market. I think it was a mixture of pricing being insane, not awful bang for the buck, and transitioning away from that style as a market as a whole that has caused Frank Mueller to really decline in popularity. Now, I always found them to be very handsome watches. Pre-owned, I think they're an absolute steal nowadays. But yeah, 25 or 20 grand for an ETA-based chronograph, I want some of what Mr. Mueller was smoking or snorting, according to rumors. Then we're going to go with Baume & Mercier, a very popular entry-level luxury brand for a very long time, 90s and 2000s. I remember when I first got into watch retail, Baume & Mercier was selling extremely well. Now, what is the problem with Baume & Mercier? I just don't think they kept up with their rivals. Their main rival, in my opinion, is Longines. Now, while Longines was innovating, putting interesting semi-in-house movements into their watches. Baume & Mercier was always slightly more expensive and pretty much entirely at a base. That, and I think their Hamptons advertising almost strictly to the American market didn't go off very well. Longines had a rich history to pull its marketing from. Baume & Mercier did not. They've always been more of an assembler of very handsome watches, but an assembler nonetheless. And I got to the point where Baume & Mercier, which is owned by Richemont doesn't even manage them in the US anymore. They gave it to a distributor. Basically, Richemont doesn't want to have the cost of hiring people to run Baume & Mercier in the US, so they got a distributor to do it instead because it's cheaper. Now, if that's not the sign of a declining brand, I don't know what is. I think this is particularly sad because I always found Baume & Mercier to be a very handsome watch. Yes, never high horology, but always very handsome. I kind of wanted one when I first got into watch retail. And it's a shame because, as I said, beautiful, well-made watches, but a mixture of, once again, pricing, bad bang for the buck, and awful marketing has seen this strong brand decline. Now we're going to go with one of my favorite brands from the era. I've talked about them before, but we're going to go with Corum. Now, Corum was never a huge brand, but they were popular. Their Corum bubble watches were super cool in the early 2000s. Then they had the Admiral's Cup with the flags, also very interesting. Unfortunately, actually, I just noticed this, similar to Baume & Mercier and Frank Mueller, Corum had insane pricing, which is, I guess a trend we can see here. But they also never evolved. Their watches always kind of looked the same. They almost stuck too much to their DNA and didn't really innovate. And now that they are innovating with new bubbles, it's too little too late. Very few people know what Corum is. Whereas back in my day when I first got started, Corum was a brand that was known. Maybe it wasn't for you, maybe it was too quirky, but people knew what a Corum was. Whereas nowadays, nobody has any idea, and you can find these heavily, heavily discounted. Now, am I going to own a vintage bubble? Absolutely. I love me some Corum bubble. But nowadays, they are definitely a shadow of their former self. Anyway, guys, these are 3 watch brands from when I got started in the watch industry that are no longer anywhere near the same position as they used to be. I just wanted to talk about them. I'm not sure why, but it was a fun little, retrospective I had in my head thinking back of when I first got into this game. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give this video a thumbs up if you did. It really does help. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more content. And of course, I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.